Well, I asked that question when I was speaking to the planners, the Planning Association. They recognize challenges for practitioners is that the guiding documents aren't there, and that they feel passionate about engagements and whatnot. They said if it's in ethics and guidelines more strongly, it empowers them. So I'm always curious to see how that's done. It's a good presentation.
Yes, I have a question for Louise from. The last thing you said was you mentioned management of these cultural historic sites. And from a practitioner's point of view, that's a huge frustration. We've worked on a few heritage sites with community people and parks people participating, but the actual management and ongoing maintenance of those sites has proven to be a huge challenge. And who takes ownership? And the park seems to be pulling away from that aspect of those national historic sites.
No, I agree. It's a challenge. But I think our role is to educate and really to go back to bring this methodology about understanding and not to making any conclusion too fast. But certainly that's what we do when we are involved.
Yes, back there.
Hi, my name is Desiree. I'm a student here at the University of Vancouver. I believe that cultural landscapes and heritage landscapes are quite important to preserving identity and culture. So one thing that really struck me as all three of you were talking was what happens to the edges of those heritage values. And what can we do as landscape architects to manifest between those thresholds?
Yeah, well, I don't know if but what I found is like the edges in a more physical way, like often the historic setting, often it's so important. And to talk about, again, speaking with the communities, and that's one of the challenge with one of the projects for Boseku is that you have to, in order to have some control of what's happening around it, you have to communicate it, to the different management levels of the site that and their turn, they go and they speak to the communities. It's complex, yeah.
I'm also just wondering if there should be more that should occur over time, or how will that happen in terms of future implications?
Sorry, I missed the first part of your question.
So I'm just wondering, cultural landscapes have identity and palisades and layers of cultural and historical information, and the edges have this other identity, right? And how is there blurring that can occur? And do you have an idea of how that blurring will occur over time?
Yeah, well, what we, from a standards point of view, standards and guideline point of view, the continuous use of a place is very important. The day that it stopped being used is being large. It's very dangerous for the place. So I think it's important that no, you don't develop the kind of edges that are being completely disconnected, and that this is where these new layers. There is a few new layers that bring these new values that are tied to the communities. So it should never freeze an historic landscape. It needs to evolve. It needs to, but how you do that? But how do you protect and respect the other layers? I think that's the challenge. But no, it's possible. And I think this is where designer, landscape architect, have a really strong role to play.
I have a question for you, Marie-Claude. You talked about these trenches with vegetation where birds came, and and you said that birders value this vegetation.
Yes.
So what did you do? Did you keep the vegetation there for the birders, so you took out the vegetation to return to the original
So I think
pattern?
I think especially because also the maintenance and the impact on the historic site of removing the trees. So I think it's a more again minimal intervention, and it will be more a case to do archaeological study first, and eventually to get people to the trench, to the views, but it will never come back. And there will be parts of the site when we can still value the open views, like military views, onto the surrounding. But right now, we don't see in terms of impact. We don't see returning to the original landscape. It's not going to. But again, it's the evolution, and I think it's for now that's the approach that we're taking.
Yes, back there.
Richard Barrow from the University of Manitoba. The discussions that we've heard seem to focus on, starting with what Jim was saying earlier, when we're talking about the Indigenous peoples here, we're really thinking of a colonial past, those who are colonizing and those who have been colonized. How is Canada working to represent, tell stories, and colonize? All the examples seem to be about this monumentalism of a colonial past, works, Europe, and it's
Yeah. Well, I cannot speak for Parks Canada because I'm in the different department, but we certainly, I don't, that's not the way that I see. I think more and more in our certainly understanding, we don't start at the colonialist, period. We really go back, and we also have to involve the indigenous communities. So I think it's interesting to see more this type of approach being used. So I agree that it was maybe in the past, but I think we're taking another turn now, and certainly in our analysis we always go back and as much try to understand as much as we can in our understanding.
Yes.
You brought up, or were mentioning about leaving room for future generations or future interventions, and I was just wondering if you could speak a bit more to that, or what that kind of does look like in design.
Yeah, but about leaving plans for the other generation, I think we recognize that we don't know everything, and we have to be really careful when we do anything. We try to make sure that what we do also is distinguishable, subordinate, so people come back later, they understand that what we did was not part of the historic place, so it was a new layer. So there is an approach and the details even to do that. So I think it's just to be, it's not about us. I think somebody mentioned that before, that it's not, as a designer, it's not about our design, it's about the place, making sure that it's, we recognize that we're just one part in the whole evolution.
Yeah, and I would say also when you intervene on the site, it's a frame in a time. You evaluate what are the values at that time you have to intervene, and you decide, you or the expert and the community decide what are the values you want to keep for the next generation. But the next generation will do what they want to do. They will redo the process, and they will return to these questions.
I think of the Citadel in Halifax, and point that out because I'll assume that the treatment of the site itself has been very well done. It's been relatively preserved. But some of the most important aspects of that are now forever lost because of land use decisions made with respect, particularly to view sheds, both to and from the Citadel. And how is your group now dealing with the fact that so many of these considerations for protection of the understanding of that site, the importance of that site, are really outside of your jurisdiction from simply designating a site or a building, but rather lie in much more deep land use discussions, in that case with the municipality. And because I just feel like the last 10 years, for instance, or the decisions made over the last 15 years, basically destroyed the importance of the site, not really, but I mean, drastically impacted.
Yeah.
And it's just like bad decisions at the land use planning level in terms of where they're allowing building and so on. So how do you deal with that very political decision, political reality of influencing and providing information to municipalities so that they don't make foolish mistakes?
Well, I think it's frustrating, and I think I don't think there is that much that we can do other than to tell the story of the place as much as we can when people are visiting. Even though the viewshed might be being affected, there might be, and this is where really new technology apps and can help us to recreate some of these views. But it's really to tell the story, and the political side of things we have to leave it basically for others, because this is not our. Frankly, it's not. We don't understand it. It's not our. But that we believe that. Especially with some monuments these days that we hear about, it's very. So what do we do? Like, even it's very political of what we can do. Well, this is, as I said, for us, it's just to tell the story the way it is, and what we think and I was mentioning to someone yesterday also in terms of, there is, of course, it's focused on historic landscape, but I think as landscape architect, we can speak about the value also for the communities, about green spaces. It's not about the historic level only, it's about everything and how the beneficial aspect of this place. So I think that's the role that we try to play, but for the other parts, yes, it's frustrating, but we don't, I don't know.
It just seems that there has to be more effort put into making clear the importance of contextual landscape, whether it's a visual thing like that, like a sit-down, or it's a broader view at, of an important heritage site in Saskatoon. Everything that's happening around it. There are ways that controls could be put in place that would stifle development, but need to be more informed. And so there's no mechanism for protecting those kinds of landscape contexts of historic sites.
Yeah, we do try. I mean, but the viewscape, I think it's an excellent kind of a way to grab the surrounding landscape. And I think this is where I think there is so much to do on that respect, to already identify the views that are important, that in future intervention, at least people are aware. For the one that happened, I think at some point we have to think about other means to speak about this value. But yeah, certainly visual landscape, it's really where, as a landscape architect, and developing tools to really express as a more like bigger scale the value of these the viewshed and planning is really where we should play a role. I agree.
The decision by the Hawaii is completely fascinating and beautiful and poetic in terms of letting their totems decay. I'm sure there must be some hardcore preservationists that are just really freaking out about that decision. And so I'm curious to know what type of documentation takes place in terms of archival materials so that that kind of history isn't completely lost? Or?
Well, I can, for the part that we were involved, we have some very sophisticated now instrument to I suppose, photogrammetry to really record all these totems. So they've been recorded to, in fact, to a point that even though this day we cannot, what we see, it's like an image. In the future, if there is more way to develop or to see more pixel, we have so much pixel capture that it allows even for more new tools to be able to see even more in the future. So it's really sophisticated that way, and that's an approach that I see more and more in archaeology as well. Is that preserving through recording? Well, sometimes that's the best we can do.
Right. So it could be like in the future, it could be like a virtual reality type.
Yes, and it does already happen.
Yeah.
And so that's why we capture so much information and data when we go on the site. And I would say that in our group, heritage recording is very, very popular. And I would say, unfortunately, sometimes it just, before doing any intervention, and sometimes not necessarily controlling what will be the impact, the best thing you can do is really to record the cultural landscape and the heritage fabric before that you do any intervention.
Brian goes to University of Manitoba. The question about if heritage is what we pass down that becomes part of the body of the culture, what's the role or what's the responsibility that landscape architecture should play in beginning to think about the heritage we're creating right now, particularly with relationship to industrial heritage or the sort of landscape processes that we're putting into place that are going to be our legacy to the future? How do we start to have conversations about, I guess, the heritage of the future?
It's interesting. I have something else. It's a very good question. I think that the work on the landfill, the metropolitan area of Bologna, has this idea behind, because we are aware that, we are aware that what we do now is going to be inherited by future generations. So, in that case, the approach, and maybe the answer also to the other two questions here, was to really try to understand the current condition of the site, but the current condition is the result of historic transformations of the land. So it was try to figure out contemporary functions, current conditions, and how the history provide us with that kind of current condition. And try to imagine both environmental benefits during and after really the operational activity of the waste disposal in the landfill site, and the cultural aesthetic value of that territory. So also the idea not to keep hiding this contemporary function is culturally, at least in that place, is culturally relevant because it's not common. The common strategy is just to cut off, not to think about, not to see anything. It's better not to see, not to know. But we are generating that places, we are generating waste. So why we don't want to deal with the result of the consequences of our society life? So that was the approach, try to dialogue with the history, make the history an inspiration for the present project, but trying to figure out which is the place, what is the place when the waste management is over. There are a lot of stuff behind the project.
And in terms of what landscape architects are doing in contemporary period, like right now, and will be for next generation heritage, I think we have to think what do we want to leave for future generation, as well as what do we want to keep from the past for the future generation. And be conscious that it's a layer that we're putting on a site. And I would say document what you do. The reason why you're doing this transformation is important too, because too many often we don't have, when we do research in historical landscape, we don't have any documents. We don't know why the designer did that for what, and when you don't have documents, it's hard to understand the value of the site. You have to do more research, what's value, general value of this kind of design at that period. So leave trace.
Right, we've come to the end of our session, and I'd like you to join me in thanking the speakers before we have lunch.